Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linda Janak, and I will be your speaker for this afternoon. We're going to be talking about the 5 common mistakes made in 360 feedback reviews. Just a little bit of background on me. I've done hundreds and hundreds of 360 campaigns with individuals as a coach and also as a service provider under Talent Guard with numerous different organizations. And we've done everything from designing the actual competencies to managing the programs and to actually delivering coaching. So I have a lot of experience in this area, and it's one of my favorite topics, 360s, because I think it can do organizations a lot of good if it's done in the right way. And I am also the CEO of Talent Guard, the company that is hosting this today, and we're always open to your questions and your feedback on the format of the webinar and the content, so please feel free to send that our way. In addition, if you have questions, please type the message in the chat box, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. The conversation part of this take about 35 minutes, and then we'll leave room for Q&A. Sometimes we run over a little bit, but I will try to be right on target with time. So without further ado, I'd like to get started on the topic. So I'd like you to meet John, attractive fellow here in the picture. John is also known as Mr. Top Sales Guy. Now, John has been working for a company for quite some time. He has been he's been at the organization for about 15 years. He started at the bottom as a sales associate and is still an individual contributor, and he works for a medical device company, a large medical device company, billion-dollar company, and they've had a tremendous growth over the past 5 years. And in addition to that, the company has a goal to double its revenue in the next 5 years. So what's the situation with John? Well, John was promoted, and John is struggling. He's struggling as a new manager because he was promoted to manager of a sales team, and he no longer is driving just the individual success and results of his own bag, but he's now responsible for the success and development and targets of a team that has about 10 people. John was excited about the promotion, but he was apprehensive because he'd never managed before. He's always been an individual contributor. His boss isn't quite sure what to do with John, so the boss suggests that John have a 360 review. This is typically what happens in a lot of organizations when they're not sure what to do with an employee. They, depending on the managers, they'll typically say, let's do a 360 review so we can understand what is going on. All of the intent is good, sometimes the execution is not right. So John is feeling perplexed, confused, nervous, scared. He's always been a superstar, and he's not used to feeling out of sorts. So John is reluctant to do a 360 that his manager suggested, but he wants to learn more. He's open to learning. He's always been open to learning. That's how he really got successful in the first place. And anybody that's ever done a 360 or who wanted to introduce it know that most people feel like John. It's very intimidating. A lot of people don't want to be assessed. I found in my own business prior to this that people would literally get sick before an assessment because they just weren't sure what to expect because they want to answer the right way in the best way possible. So that really needs to be considered as you're thinking about rolling out a 360. It's an instrument, but the people have emotions. So people feel like John. So what can John expect? He's heard about 360s before, but he's really not sure what it is because he's never investigated it and he's never done one. So what John gathers from hearing just odds and ends and searching on a search engine about 360s is that he is going to be evaluated by multiple people. First, he's going to evaluate himself, and then other people, including peers, customers, subordinates, his manager, a whole bunch of people. And it can be a small review that has 6, and it can be a large review that has up to 15 to 20. We try not to get larger than that because the report becomes extensive. But typically what we're going to do is we're going to use people who are above John, on John's same level, and people who are underneath John. And the important thing to remember is the people that we select, or that the participant recommends we select, should have direct experience with John. They have had to work with him, observe his behavior, be able to comment on his behavior, both good and bad, because it's important to have that well-rounded view. But John is not sure why his company wants to do a 360 review. He's still a little confused because he comes from the old school that if you're having a problem, you talk to your manager gives you feedback, you act on that feedback, you make change if you can make change, and you move on. So what he's hearing from the water cooler conversations is that it could be for performance improvement, it could be management development, it could be career development, or it could be succession planning. He's heard lots of different things because lots of people are having conversations about their experiences with 360, both good and bad. And so he's feeling very overwhelmed. He's hearing lots of voices from lots of people about the positiveness of the tool. You know, it can be objective, but it can also identify weaknesses. Identifying weaknesses make people feel like they're not going to be able to trust the process. So in any organization, what you're going to see is all of these thoughts will be traveling through the organization because everybody has an opinion. So he doesn't know what to think. He's not sure if this is going to be good for him or bad for him, and whether he should resist it or jump on board. So we want John to meet Sarah. And Sarah is Miss HR in the organization. She runs the, she's a business partner to one of the divisions within a medical device company, responsible for the sales territory. And Sarah has lots of experience doing 360 reviews. And that's one of the reasons why the medical device company hired her, because she had rolled out numerous successful programs. And because Sarah has rolled out numerous successful programs, she's made all of the mistakes in the past, and she knows what to avoid. So let's review those 5 mistakes. And there are others, but we're just going to talk about some of the big ones. A lack of purpose and focus on specific business or strategic needs. What typically happens is in the example we talked about before. Somebody thinks somebody needs a review, and they're just going to either hire some expert consultant or buy a tool and start just rolling it out based on the traditional values and behaviors that are in the company. That is not a specific focus. Allowing participants to select raters without moderation. Lack of communication about the intent of a 360 review. Lack of accountability for change and development. And people are not generally trained in giving and receiving critical feedback. Now let's explore some of these in more detail. Now when we talk about the specific business or strategic need, what typically happens is companies will mix purposes together. So they'll go, well, we want to use it for development purposes and for performance management. It's very dangerous because they have different outcomes. The competencies will be different. The rating scale will be different. What you do with the information will be different. Who uses and sees that information will be different. So we really advise strongly to have a clear purpose. And these are just some examples of how you can have a specific purpose in each one of those areas, but it should be for the selection of one. For example, performance improvement. Enhance marketing skills to strengthen the marketing team. This particular organization may have a marketing team that is not generating enough leads outbound, inbound. They don't have enough social media skills to keep up with the demand in the market. And so what the organization is seeing is that overall, one marketing department against another might be lacking in skill. So we got to figure out where's the skill gap. So finding that skill gap, identifying that based on marketing competencies is how you would structure that review. Versus management development, if it's improving leadership depth, based on the future typically is what happens. So in the case of the medical device company, what would happen is the team, executive team, and other stakeholders would sit around a table and say, where does this organization need to be in 5 years? And what type of individual are we going to need for the future? And what do those competencies look like? Are they the same as today, or will they be different based on economic trends? And I'll give you an example. Within the medical device, and I'm just using this as one example, but there's an industry shift that is happening where salespeople will no longer be able to sell directly to doctors. Now, you're talking about generations of people who have built up these relationships over, centuries even. I mean, because some of these relationships are carried down. Now suddenly, these people have to sell to hospitals, and they're selling to large committees. So it's no longer sales on the golf course or building those one-on-one relationships. It's 20 to 30 people on this committee that you have to satisfy, and each person on that committee has a rep that they've used. So those sales skills in the future are going to be much different than they are today. So how do you build a competency model that will let you know what you need and then drive people toward that? Just 2 examples here. Now, supporting that clear purpose requires a meaningful competency model, as I just gave you in the 2 examples above. If you're using one generic competency model for your 360, don't believe that you're getting as much benefit as you could if you had that specific purpose and then developed a model to go along with it. Now, you can run lots of different 360 campaigns. Nobody said you have to run just one. They can be different for different departments, different grades, different groups, different purposes. And if you have a tool that supports that. A lot of people just buy an off-the-shelf 360, and it's the 15 leadership competencies that have been proven to be the most effective. Well, I don't really subscribe to that theory. I believe that every organization has a different set based on where they are, small, medium, large, the type of industry that they're in. So there's, that one-size-fit-all approach is not effective. It'll work and you'll get meaningful data, but you could really structure it in a way that is meaningful to your executive team, to your employees, based on where you're at as an organization. And one of the most important things that we've seen is involving key stakeholders in the development of the competency model. We worked with a huge manufacturing company, and it was just going to be HR. They said, we're going to drive it, we're going to see what it is, and we strongly advised against that because we know, as Sarah knows, that that's not the right thing to do. So a task force was created, and that task force included executives, HR, organizational development, individual contributors from many different departments, and some managers. And that was the team that determined for that specific purpose what those competencies should be, how we should word them, how many we should have, and it was a great collaborative effort, and it did not happen in a box. It happened transparently. People were able to talk about it. Because they were involved, they were champions for the 360. They started those water cooler conversations. They got buy-in before it happened. They minimized fears. So it can serve a great purpose in introducing the program into an organization. I'm looking at a question here. Okay, so one of the questions, and I do like answering questions as we go, one of the questions is, are you saying that every 360 in an organization should have the same purpose, or every 360 in a specific campaign? No, absolutely not. I'm saying that what you should do is look at what is going on strategically in your business. and I'm giving you examples, they tend to fall into 4 different categories: the performance improvement, the career development, but based on your strategic needs. So for the medical device company, they needed to grow revenue from $5 million to $10 billion in 5 years. That is a huge goal. So you'll see in the coming slides what they needed really was a succession plan, not a performance improvement plan. So you really have to think about how do you align the 360 to where your organization is at, and then roll out a campaign that way. There's no one-size-fits-all. It's really dependent on your organization, and it's not an easy process picking the kind of 360 that you want based on your goals, because sometimes organizations aren't clear on what their goals are. So that makes it a little more challenging for HR. But in those situations, all you can do is put your best foot forward. And I can answer more questions for you later, Betty. If you need it, you can take it offline with me too. Mistake number 2. Boom. Allowing participants to select raters without moderation. And this is a huge area of controversy. What typically happens in most review programs, individuals are picking who is going to rate them with no say from managers or HR. So what do these people tend to do? Well, some pick their spouses, some pick their friends, some pick their best advocates and or their toughest critics. And I find the people that are highly successful pick their toughest critics because they truly want the feedback and they're taking it on as a challenge. But sometimes that can really skew the results if 5 out of the 7 that you picked are your tough critics. So your results might look skewed compared to somebody who went in a more conservative manner. So poor rater selection can negatively impact final results. The way that we look at rater selection is, in a very strategic way. We look at it in different review types. So, for example, you have your unmoderated, which typically most organizations do, but we find that 360s work better under one of these 3 types of review programs. And I know there's a lot of data here, so this will be posted online after. And when we say moderator, it can be anybody. It can be HR, it can be a manager, it can be an internal advisor, mentor, it can be an external coach. We're using that term broadly. So unmoderated and ungoverned, as you know, participants agree to be reviewed and select their own reviewers. Participants know who is completing the reviews, so whoever they invited. It starts when invitations are typically accepted. So once I pick, it's out there and people are starting to respond, and then typically the reports will be generated from that specific program. When you're looking at a moderated, ungoverned, so what this means is participants agree to be reviewed, and what happens is if it's electronically, in most cases like what we do, that list, once they select it, goes to the moderator. Now the moderator is able to look at that list, and because they know that person intimately, or they'll sit with HR, or many people, it can be a group that is the moderating team, a task force. They can say, are these good choices for John? Has John selected the appropriate group, a group that will give the best feedback that we can, positive and negative, negative meaning improvement-wise, and if so, the moderator can accept all of them, or if we see some that we think are just too friendly, they're the pub buddies afterward, we can reject it. That gives John an opportunity with an email to say, we feel that these people aren't appropriate for the review for this review. Please select 2 others, or it could be 1 other. So John now has the ability to select new people. So he's still a participant in that type of review. He has some control, but he's not controlling the process. And we really try to, and the whole goal of this is to drive to more quality, objective reviews. Now, a governed review, what this means, and a small population uses a governed review, but they can be highly effective. A governed review is when A participant will agree to the 360, but the participant has no input to who the reviewers will be. What happens is the moderator, selects everybody on behalf of John, and John will never know who was part of the program, unless it's a review that's transparent, meaning it's not anonymous. And either all of these can be anonymous or not anonymous. And so, that brings up different issues with confidentiality and how frank people will be. But you have the option to do those. Now, when would you use the different review types? Typically, what we've seen is that an unmoderated one would be used more for career and skill development. Moderated would be used more for performance improvement. If somebody's on a PIT plan or we're really trying to advance the performance of a person. And then the governed more for management development and succession planning. And for that governed succession planning, simply because oftentimes a lot of organizations don't want to reveal who's on the succession path. And I'm not advocating either way. We typically like it transparent so people know. But when you're really thinking about the next generation of how this company is going to evolve and sustain itself, we typically see the best results with that type of a program. Mistake number 3, lack of communication. And this really is what I would say has been the downfall in the HR area. And it's not for lack of wanting to do it. It's just really not understanding how much communication is needed and or poor timing. And we'll talk about both of those. Whenever we're in a program with the 360, there really is some phases that have to happen. People have to be aware of 360. What is a 360? How is it going to be used? What's the definition? Why would we might be thinking about it? All of these communications need to happen via email, town hall meetings, presentations, the process. What's going to happen? How are we going to score it? And what is the confidentiality? And all of these can't just be one email that's sent out in one campaign. This is something that needs to spread over the course of a campaign. And we're going to talk about timing at the end of the presentation. This one thing will eliminate a lot of fear, because once the communications start to happen, it does become a little bit burdensome for HR because there's lots of questions being asked. So when we talk about communication, that also involves training. And that's cascaded training. Train your train your executives, train your managers, then train your team. Communicate to your executives, communicate to your managers, communicate to your team, so that everybody is on the same page saying the same thing. So we're talking about 360s, and I've seen 360s be used in all of these situations, and personally been brought in to coach organizations through it because there was lots of issues going on. But when shouldn't you use a 360? Typically in times of change, in volatility. And we're talking about organizational reorgs, onboarding, or with very new employees, in low trust environments, acquisitions and or mergers, and prior to compensation discussions. And here's why. This is where the biggest trust issues happen. This is where people are saying, oh my gosh, I'm being reviewed because they're trying to decide if I'm good for this organization or if I'm not, or it's going to be a head-to-head competition between myself and another person with this acquisition, and oh, they're trying to figure out how to keep me from getting more income in my compensation review. So it really, these critical areas here will drive a mistrust in the process. And so we really advise not doing it during those times. So how do we overcome that? Well, we say good words at the right time. So when do they work best? In organizations that are stable. And this doesn't mean that organizations that aren't changing. Organizational change is going to happen all the time. But typically in a stable environment where you're not having reorgs every 3 months or 6 months, but you've got the organization, it's working, now you're just trying to figure out how to drive growth and how to drive efficiencies with the right team. When you need to solve real business issues, if you're running against, an example was there was an organization that was incredible at selling, but they could not deliver on the back end. They were missing every single delivery date. So we had a delivery issue. So the entire competency model was based on understanding the problems in the delivery. So that would be one example. And an organization that's open to giving and receiving feedback. Oftentimes, because this is a change process, some organizations don't adapt to change very rapidly. So they're used to a very traditional, formal way of how feedback happens. They don't have that coaching mentality. So if that's the case, learning and teaching people about what it means to give open feedback is going to be required first, and then moving into something like a 360. So open and transparent communications are required during pre-planning, before you ever even launch it, prior to the actual 360 launch, during the actual process, and then after the process to minimize friction. A question that I have, who received results, the participant, the manager, or both? And I'm going to get to that momentarily. Mistake 4, lack of accountability. When we're talking about, now that we've done these assessments and everybody's feeling really good, whether they were delivered via one-on-one or whether they were delivered as a team, what we don't want is to have that report, like we see often, serve as a one-time read, put in a drawer, and it's never to be looked at again. That's not what we want. So in those instances, when we see that happening, it's because it didn't start from the top and cascade down and carry through with coaching. It's really important, and you hear it all the time, and it is important to get that buy-in from the top and then cascade it down to the executive level, the manager level, and then the individuals. Lack of accountability where their competency model is not tied to the purpose, which we talked about. And then not providing adequate resources and time for development. And I truly believe that people do own their own careers, but I also know from 15 plus years of career coaching that people are not taught how to manage their careers. So they really don't know what to do with feedback when they get it. They most expect a plan to be put in place and say, go do it. And then when they say do, what does do mean? Is it a webinar? Is it training? Is it a book? People need guidance in those areas so that they can act. And I've seen personally, when we give people a plan based on a 360 that's very specific in nature, people run with it because they're excited about growth and the opportunity to develop new skills. So, strong support. So what's Sarah's advice to overcome this particular area? Leader involvement, learning resources, and this doesn't mean that HR has a catalog of training that can be accessed over the web that employees need to search through. This means that when you're creating a 360, and if you have 15 competencies, and under each competency you have 5 or 6 indicators, for every indicator and for every rating score, you should have a development option tied to that. It's very important, and here's why. Let's say, for example, you're using a rating score, a rating scale of 1 to 5. 1 is a top scores, and 5 is, not so great. We want to give our top scoring people recommendations for learning, too. They still need to develop. And we may need to give more to somebody who scored a lot less. So it's all relevant based on who it is we're looking at that right time. Mentoring. Line managers need to provide the time and the mentoring to act on the resources that HR has spent time and money bringing into the organization. And then continuity. When you're communicating the program, it's not a one-time event and I've seen it best in this medical device company where we did the assessment with the executive team, 25 people, and 12 months later did it again, and we specifically measured the movement, not only on their scores within their report, but also on their succession charts. And were people tracking the way that we thought that they needed to be? Mistake 5. People are not trained in giving and receiving feedback. And this is an area where you see lots and lots of discussions happening about this particular area. Interpreting 360 feedback is not an easy process. You can't just expect HR and or managers to read the report, get it, understand it, and be able to act on it. Delivery of feedback is paramount to how constructively it's perceived. You have to remember that during the feedback process, during the debriefing, most people, when that report is coming, have a wall up. That trust factor is waffling back and forth. So delivering it in a way that is very positive and upbeat and development-oriented while still having the 1, 2, 3 punch as needed, depending on the person. And John had some 1, 2, 3 punches in his report that he needed to work on. Having that is important, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And most managers are uncomfortable giving feedback, or they downright don't want to give it at all. And we see this is the #1 reason I see most people coming in to Talent Guard, is to help them figure that out. So what can we do about it? Let's meet Jane. Jane is Mrs. Career Coach, and she advises that interpreting 360 can be done external or with the manager who learns and understands how to identify and interpret themes, because that's really what 360s are all about. Looking across all of those different competencies and finding the themes, dealing with the range of emotions, and you will see them. I've seen men and women upset, and I've seen people cry, and I've seen everything in between, and they will have them because it's very personal. And then being able to target areas of development with a specific plan. So this team together understands how to manage a 360 program to get positive results. So what was Sarah's actions? When she was thinking about rolling out this program in her organization, she had a clear purpose. She decided it was for succession planning, and she decided she didn't want to do governance. She wanted to do a moderated review. She had a formal plan. That plan was shared with the entire team. She involved lots of stakeholders in selecting the competencies. She communicated up, down, and across the organizations. She enlisted marketing support in helping her do that because she wasn't quite sure what to do. And they had emails and town hall meetings and posters, and they resolved all kinds of concerns and issues. They conducted a pilot with the executive team first and foremost to get buy-in from the top. She hired a professional coach who worked with the executives and developed custom IDPs. She trained her managers, and she evaluated the outcomes so that she could improve the program. And what that did for John was a lot. Actually, it relieved his fears that he was going to be evaluated alone. He was excited that peers were a part of it and that it was for succession. He was enthusiastic about being involved in the process. He was impressed that HR had a communication plan, thankfully had a voice in selecting who his reviewers were, appreciative that confidentiality was enforced, and he had a choice of who to share the results with. Now, oftentimes, 360s, and this is when we talk about process, who's it going to be shared with? Oftentimes what we see is John's reports will be shared with himself and his manager and his coach. Now, if you're doing it in a team environment, then John will have his own results, but he can choose to talk about it with the peers that are in the room, or the people that are taking, not necessarily just peers. And that is something that has to be predetermined at the start so that John knows how his specific information will be used in that company. Now, for succession planning purposes, John knew that the entire executive team would be looking at this particular report because they were planning for succession. So they all needed to know, because they were benchmarking people from today and where they need to be, how that data would be used. And so he was aware of that, intrigued by the results of his report because he was the top sales guy feeling really good. Now he's being evaluated on different things, and it was a real eye-opener. He was excited to have a dedicated coach to his development and happy to know that his company was going to invest in him. So together, extraordinary personal and organizational benefits can be realized. It takes a team effort. Some of those benefits are that you have a broader perspective on employee skills. You have information that is objective and actionable. People can do something with it. Employees know themselves better. They have a deep sense of of where they are and where they need to be. They can have a formalized development plan that they can act on over 6 to 12 months. Expectations get clarified because once we have trained those managers on how to handle and engage in those conversations, everybody's on the same page. It definitely can inspire positive change, and it can increase retention and engagement. So what did Sarah's roadmap look like? So how would one execute a 360 campaign? And I won't go through all of these, but Sarah's providing her timeline for you, all the way from pre-planning and how long it took, with all the little steps in between, to conducting the reassessment. So that you can look at this and use it for your purposes as you begin to think about 360s in your organization. And Sarah's thoughts, well, what Sarah did is she used a tool called Talent 360, which is actually offered up by Talent Guard. And she was extremely excited because she was able to look at all of the competencies, design her own competencies, run reports, run benchmarks, change the reports over time, give employees their own dashboard to be able to compare how they're doing from one report to the next. And she was able to start predicting in her own organization how people were going to develop. And that made her happy. So to be continued. Let's learn how John and Sarah use the results of the 360 feedback for succession planning. And we're going to carry the story forward in our next webinar, which is on August 15th, how to do succession planning in 7 steps. We invite you to participate in that webcast. You can sign up by following the link here. In addition, for those that are in Houston, we have our Talent Management Executive Forum coming up. It's on the 29th. We had a great turnout in Austin, and we're real excited. We've got tons of people signed up for that already, but I don't know how many spots we have left. I'd have to ask the marketing department. And then also, if you want to learn more about our Talent 360, I invite you to schedule a demo, and we can walk you through what our organization can do to help you roll out a program in your organization. And that concludes the presentation for today. If there are any more questions, I invite you to send them over now. And I'm looking at one here. How would you respond to a CEO who wants to use 360s in place of hard conversations he doesn't want to have with his employees? Yeah, that's something we just talked about. That's not a wise choice. As we showed you here, and I think this is maybe a great presentation, Betty, for you to sit down with your CEO and say, let's talk about the ramifications of doing that. Employees, what I have found, and I've coached CEOs as well, and executives, people want to know where they need to improve. They want to be told. What they don't want is to feel really bad about something that they don't do well. So it's not wise to use a 360 in replace of formal feedback. It has to be, I look at 360 as a catalyst to open the conversation. It gives us focused starting points where we can sit down, we can look at something on paper, and you and I can have conversations. And as a CEO, I can bring up examples of, here's the time that I noticed when this happened, and it relates to this specific competency right here. So let's talk about how, because when you're having conversations, you have to teach people what not to do. That is managers as coaches. And we need to make sure that they know what not to do. It's really hard to mentor someone. So here's what I would like to see in the future. I want to see this behavior go from A to B. That is not going to happen just on paper. Paper doesn't speak. Paper is just, a 360 or whatever you want to call it, an electronic screen. It needs to be followed up with some great information. Will we be offering succession planning in 7 steps at a different date? Not at this time, Sandy, but what we do is we post the presentation and the audio to our website, post-production, and so you will be able to just download that from the website. So we invite you to do that. And we can also send you links too if that's something you like. Any other questions about 360s, about something you're working on? What is the maximum number of development skills for a person to work on at any one time? Personally, well, okay, so let's see. I personally have coached about 2,600 people. different types of people, different industries, lawyers, teachers, nurses, you name it. And in a development plan, and I'm happy to send you an example, I never pick more than 3 critical skills to develop. Why? Because people can't develop that fast. So pick, and I prioritize them. Here's skill 1 we're going to develop, and here's your specific plan. Here's skill 2, here's your specific plan, and here's skill 3. And when you do that, you will see the needle move in terms of their development. Any other questions? Bill, we will absolutely send you a link to our webinars. We'd be happy to do that. That's great, Susie. I'm excited about that. Susie says that she's done some 360s for her client in the past and followed it with successful coaching, and that really does work well for her. And I do agree. 360s combined with coaching can really, I mean, I've heard, and I haven't seen this personally, but there's like a 700% ROI on that, and those are just those analyst reports. Personally, when I look at the use of 360s, I look at it in terms of moving the needle. And I look at people's rating scales. I say, if you're a 1, if somebody's a 5, I'm going to move them to a 4.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
Will, I'm happy to send you one of the examples of our IDPs. I'll scrub it down, and and if you have any questions on it, let me know. They've been very useful. How honest will raters be if they know management will be seeing the results? So that depends, Sue, if it's anonymous. So when you do, let me just give you an example on a 360. There are many ways that you can produce reports once the assessments are done. For example, in an output, you could have peer 1, peer 2, peer 3, or you could have peer group. And people will respond differently just knowing that. And some people don't want anonymous, and it will say the specific names of specific people in specific groups. So we found that if you're anonymous, and if it's delivered up in a peer group, a manager group, a customer group, people will be the most honest, sometimes to the point of overly honest. And what you have to do in those situations as an HR person, it's important that you review every review that goes out prior to it goes out, because there'll be personal attacks in there, because people are people. And you as HR will know, because anonymous is anonymous to the participant, not to the administrator. The person who's the administrator of the campaign will know exactly who responded with what, because you get all the individual reports. And then you got to determine whether you're going to, let your company know that as well. But some of those things really need to be scrubbed because they're personal attacks. And the goal of a 360 is not to hurt someone personally. It's to give them objective feedback. And sometimes people are not mature in the way that they would answer, and you have to account for that. Any other questions? No? Should I use the prior 360 again? Susie, I think that's a great question, and I would first take a look at a couple of things. When you did your 360, was it for a specific purpose? What happened post 360? What outcomes, positive outcomes, indicators, performance indicators happen? Did you see movement? Was it something that was just tried because it's the thing to do? And did people get benefit from it? So you need to ask yourself those first. Sometimes you can do it with an employee survey, an engagement survey, asking people, do you think it was effective? What could we improve? I always think it's good to ask your company. But I would go through this list and use it as a checklist to say, did you do some of these things? And if you did, absolutely run the same 360, because when you have a 360 with a specific group for a specific purpose, you do want to try to keep it consistent. Remember, because you're comparing one year to the next, so you want to be able to measure those results and not change it all the time. But it's okay to change it if you can make it better. Can I comment on canned electronic tools for 360, such as Disk 363? You know, sometimes organizations can't afford custom tools like what we offer at Talent Guard, and they can work. I personally think that the more customized you can get it, the better, because it really is about your business and it's about your business purpose. But if you can't do that, then at least having something that you can use off the shelf is good. It's not the greatest solution, but at least you can start the conversation. And as I said, that's really what the 360 is about, is to get that conversation going, is to get people focused on what they need to focus on, put development into action, and drive results. Any other questions? And I'm also happy to answer questions via email if you don't have any right now, or you can always call me. No? Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for hanging in the presentation, and I would definitely be open to your feedback. This is the first time I've tried the story format because I really like to make things real and relevant rather than just, I guess, boring slides, if you will. Let me know if you like it, because I will continue to kind of move down this path, whether I need more data or less. And I hope you have a wonderful week, and have a great day. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, everybody.